Joe, Ohio State beats Indiana yesterday, and a really kind of early part of that game was, I think, Ohio State fans were like, oh, man, what's about to happen? And then all of a sudden, I thought Will Howard turned it on, turned it out, and Ohio State is able to take over and win against Indiana. Joe, I want to start off here with this. If you did not watch the game and you see the final score, you see 38-15, you probably say to yourselves, oh, okay, maybe, Ohio State gets a score late, a little bit closer than what it was. Joe, after the touchdown that Indiana had to start off the game, their first offensive drive, they had a punt, a fumble, a turnover on downs, end of half, block punt, touchdown. So for 39 minutes of that game, they got physically dominated. Rourke got sacked 5 times. Simon had 2.5 sacks. And what was a line of scrimmage, how do I want to say this? Masterclass by Ohio State in their win versus Indiana.
Yeah, Ohio State did a really good job of not just stepping into a matchup where they knew that they had an athletic advantage along the line of scrimmage and just saying, no, we're just going to send 4 and we're going to see what we can produce. Knowles was really aggressive. He was sending a ton of pressure. And I tweeted this out. I really think that when you go into this matchup against Oregon, it was one of the things that they chose not to do. And I think that they were really arrogant coming into that matchup thinking like, oh, our guys are going to get home. No, you have the athletes to send pressure and produce disruptive plays on a snap-to-snap basis. I think that you have figured out the recipe for success in the playoff. If you can do that to Indiana, you're going to be able to win playoff games and go on a run and to maybe even win the Big Ten championship game in a couple of weeks. Talking about Indiana first, just to get them out of the way, because personally, my biggest takeaway here is with Ohio State and for how they played. Indiana was certainly pushed around. Ohio State was able to have pretty early success running the football, and it just started to snowball after that first scoring drive for Indiana. But man, Indiana just did not come to play the way that they needed to. It looked great on that first drive, but the mistakes started to mount and to mount and to mount to the point where there was no escaping. When you're in a matchup like this where there is such an athletic advantage for your opponent, you have to almost play perfectly. Like you have to play a super clean game. You have to be great in pass protection and picking up any pressures. You can't have any special teams errors. The punter for Indiana completely screwed up, not only with the muff snap that he had, but also where he placed that second punt, completely outkicked the coverage. Yes. You're not supposed to place the ball to the opposite hash. You're supposed to place the ball to right. You're supposed to put it on the short side of the field to give your coverage team room to rally to the football. So Caleb Downs was set up perfectly. A lot of short fields helped Ohio State score as easily as they did. Indiana did not come to play, I think, to the degree that we were expecting.
Oh, no. Stop. I, on Monday, said I thought it was going to be an ass whipping. And to be honest with you, did I not?
It was not directed at you. It was towards the Indiana supporters is what I
gotcha. It was an ass whooping because I know what the line of scrimmages were going to look like. I had a pretty good idea. Now, McLaughlin went down, kind of got me a little skittish on Wednesday. But, Joe, this was a line of scrimmage game. And I think that this is the part where when we talked about Indiana, when they played Michigan and it was the most physical team that they played and they also looked the exact same way that they looked yesterday. I'm like, look, man, I know that you're about to play a really physical team. And even when they got down late, like I was joking with you on Twitter and I'm like, I'm so glad I took Indiana. Joe just overwhelmed them. Now I'm going to go back to your point right here quickly. This is what I think about like Oregon versus this one. Mm-hmm. I think it's the opposite of what you said about they thought that they could get home with 4. No, I think what happened was Oregon has dudes on the outside, and you have a guy like Gabriel that can toss the ball around. So they wanted to play coverage and try to play better coverage. I think yesterday, what I continue to see was we're going to play man on man. We're going to send heat, and we're going to make Curtis Rourke beat us. If you can throw, our DBs are better than what you have at receiver. And they kept doing it all night. Over and over and over again. Joe, they're putting Caleb Downs on a slot receiver and saying, hey, we're going to put a safety on your slot and you're not going to be able to throw the ball. Coverage was so good for Ohio State against Indiana that the pressure was able to get to Rourke. To be honest with you, I saw some people blaming Curtis Rourke on social media. What for? Because there's no space. There's nowhere he could go. I mean, the kid's been really good at decision-making all year. You got locked down. You got dominated. It was a really good look. Ryan Day takes a lot of shit. But one thing that they did, to your point, they did not go out. They were not going to go out in their shield. They went after Curtis Rourke over and over again. He was 8 of 18, Joe. He had 68 yards passing. And that's the part for me that I'm like, yeah, man, I mean, you bludgeoned them. Now, I think Curt Cignetti, who we've given a lot of credit for throughout the season, got in a big-time situation. And I got to be real with you, Joe. I thought he got a little out-coached. I mean, it's not like Lawton wasn't. Well, I mean, Joe, if I'm being real with you, Lawton had 15 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. You completely got away from running the football.
That was the biggest thing for me. They were having success. Yeah.
And if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm like, well, look, man, there is one thing that Indiana on that first drive, and when they had success, I mean, it's not like Lawton throughout the game. Joe, I went just because I knew Ohio State fans would say, well, he had, a long drive late. He averaged 6 yards a carry from the second quarter and the third quarter. So it's not as if that they weren't running the football. They overwhelmed them. But I got to tell you this, Joe, I keep telling you about Will Howard, man, and the streaky stuff that he goes on. 15 straight passes that he completed on, then the wet ball, the tip, and the interception. So he ends the game 21 of 23 with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He's got weapons. I'm not saying he is a perennial all-star quarterback. He's just got serious dudes. Joe, he was going to his third progression read and Cornell Tate early in the game, and Cornell Tate is making plays. I mean, he's got Smith. He's got Mbuka. It's just what they have on the outside and the efficiency. Not saying he's dominant. The efficiency that he plays with is just why Ohio State might be, if they can get a little bit healthier, and I know their O-line's beat up, Joe, they are one of the most complete teams in all of college football.
Before I jump on that Ohio State point, Indiana's decision to completely get away from running the football was very frustrating because that was by far their most successful yard production in this game. They were not averaging a ton of EPA per rush, but like that was the only thing statistically that was in the green for them. And they actually, in the red zone, they were more successful than Ohio State, something that would be completely missed if you watch this game and you just kind of were paying attention to the flow of it. But those early downs where they kept trying to throw the ball in situations where it wasn't working, Ohio State completely overwhelmed them. Mm-hmm. What makes Ohio State so great and why they feel like they're that second best team right now, and if they beat Oregon, they should move up to the top and be the number 1 team in the country, is for the way that you just described it. I have said this since the beginning of the season, and this talking point has been misconstrued by Ohio State fans. Elks, I know that he's sometimes serious about this, and we kind of joke back and forth, but I keep bringing up, or we keep talking about my perception on Will Howard. The way that you just described Will Howard is how I've always talked about him. He is not ever going to be the guy that is going to make the unreal throw in the tight window.
He made some yesterday, though. He made.
I know that he did, but he's not Jaden Daniels. He's not Bryce Young. He's not Caleb Williams. He's not going to win the Heisman and make the ridiculous play. He's not Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. He's none of those guys. But around this roster, he's the right man for this team to win a national championship.
I agree.
He's the right guy in this circumstance to deliver the ball to all these playmakers that he has, hand the ball off to all these different running backs. He just needs his teammates to rally around him. When they lost to Oregon, it was because that final drive solely fell on his shoulders, and it felt like it was just a little bit too much for him to finish that game off. He's not
built for that. And to be
honest, what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We shouldn't hold that against him.
To be fair, I mean, not every
quarterback has to be a premier Heisman guy.
Well, Stetson Bennett. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
He's a more athletic Stetson's pretty athletic. I don't know.
He's a bigger version of him.
But I look at the OPI at the end of that Oregon game. I mean, Joey, he was moving them all the way down the field. I mean, I know he had a bad situation there late, and
that plays into it though, is that a crucial mistake by a young player on his team while he was doing everything that he was just doing his job. He wasn't necessarily like really truly exceeding it. He was doing his job.
He does his job exceptionally well then.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Joe, there's another high profile game when I look at Will Howard. Here's one thing you didn't mention though that I want to bring up. At Kansas State, he had a lot of turnovers. He's making right decisions. And this is what happens.
Being set up better.
Well, yeah, but he's got dudes. When you have dudes all around you, okay, like the interception's bullshit to me. I don't
count that. I don't count. That was a very lucky bounce, heads up play by the defender. Like I don't hold that against him.
Right. Guy turns his head around, hits his right hand, bounces up. It's a pick. It's a right read. It just goes against the stat line. I think this is about a perfect of a game, by the way, in bad weather that you could play as a quarterback. Now, let me ask you this about Ohio State. Look, their front seven was insane. We've seen them go up against Oregon. I mean, again, I could make the debate either way for Oregon and Ohio State right now. I mean, you play one team on the road, okay? You lost by one. I think Ohio State or Oregon could be the best player in the best teams in the country here. But, Joe, here's the thing that I ask you. Are you a little worried that Quinshon Judkins hasn't kind of been able to get going, or was not able to get going in this one? I know that Henderson was pretty efficient, had the scoring touchdown, had 68 yards. Like, I get all of that. You a little worried about Judkins here in the running game in some instances?
Not necessarily, because this is the whole reason why you have both of these players. You have the opportunity to turn to either guy based on who's the hot hand and who's becoming the most successful. 14 carries for 36 yards is way under the expectation of what we thought he was going to be doing in a game like this. But the fact that when they're prepared to stop when they're prepared to stop Judkins, Henderson is a different style of player. He is the guy who's going to kill you in space when Judkins is going to try and run you over. You give the ball to the other guy, and he's going to be able to produce off of less carries. This is another facet for the whole talking point of what makes Ohio State truly dangerous to be one of those few teams that looks like a national championship winning team in a year where there's not a clear-cut favorite, is that when one player doesn't play as their best, that there's another option. I mean, I'd go as far as to even bring up in the conversation we're having here where Jeremiah Smith on 5 targets only has 34 yards, and Carnell Tate, who is a good player, isn't necessarily the best receiver in this group, as a former highly touted recruit. He has 68 yards. Emeka Ibuka has a big game for 80 yards. All the different options is what makes them such a premier team. That's what's holding back some of these other teams that we thought were going to be great that have slipped up, is that whenever that top player goes down and they're unavailable, they've hindered. They've taken that step backwards. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Ole Miss. When Trey Harris is unavailable, their offense isn't as good, and Trey Harris gets banged up in the Florida game. I know that we're going a little step too far, but having this many options is same thing with Oregon. It makes them so tough to stop because you can always turn to somebody new.
I want to talk about Ohio State's defense before we turn the page here. They allowed 153 yards. So this is how I perceive it in my mind. I know you're going to yell at me, but I'm not going to fight you on this. I am told that Indiana is a playoff caliber team, right or wrong. The outside world is telling me that they're a playoff team, correct? They just held a playoff team to 153 yards. By the way, in that, one player had 179 of those yards. So, in meaning, Joe, not only did they lock down stuff yesterday defensively, they locked everybody down besides one dude, and they contained him. So there comes a part here. Everybody wants to talk about Ohio State and what they did. Defensively is where they were the most dominant yesterday. Caleb Downs, I mean, look, I hate to say this in a wrong way. I saw a lot of people tweeting this yesterday, all like, oh, man, I hadn't seen Caleb Downs in a while. Well, did you see him now? Because he's been good. He will continue to be good. He's that dude. He is that guy, and that's why you go get a dude like that. Man, I'm so impressed with them defensively, the game that they called, and just the overall sheer of how they attacked and what they did, man. It was a pure domination. So, again, you did that on a playoff team. And that's the part where I'm saying not only did you do that against Indiana, I'm supposed to be told, too, that Penn State was another one of those teams that is a playoff caliber team. And now you've done it to 2 playoff teams in a month.
Well, so that's what I think gets missed in the whole conversation about recapping this game. I think a lot of people were super quick, and this happens a lot with Ohio State, admittedly, and this is kind of like me giving them...
Well, because they have all the toys on offense, and then we want to get there, and we don't talk about how dominant they're being defensively.
What I'm trying to get at here is that everyone was so hung up on crapping all over Indiana that I think that you're right, that we do need to give love for the defensive performance by Ohio State. Like, that is something I didn't hear talked about by anybody. I feel like I didn't hear anybody mentioning that. It was all Indiana. Kurt Signetti, how he made all these brash comments in the offseason and he didn't live up to them and all that stuff. But can we give credit to Ohio State for just playing their ass off on defense? That's something that needs to be recognized, so I can get behind that point.
Very much so, man. They were dominant in a lot of different ways. Let's move on here, Joe. Let's get to Alabama and Oklahoma, another domination of a game here. Joe, hold on. Do we had a couple something? Yeah. Fish back up with a $2 super chat says over under with Birch beats OSU by even more. FDSEC and Notre Dame.
He's saying
over
that
under
Oregon
with Birch being back that Oregon beats Ohio State.
I don't know if by them. Yeah, I don't have an answer for that game yet, if I'm being honest.
No, well, here's the thing. If you're saying Birch is being back, you're using it as the equivalent of you having a home game. Because you're not going to play them at home again. You're not.
Yeah, I can't get behind that. We also have two others.
Yeah, JP says, can't wait till the SEC school has to play in South Bend in the now. Blake, how many SEC in college football?
In CFP, I think he means.
Joe, okay. All right. Yep. Go ahead. Talk all the shit you want to. I'm going to sit here and wait. When was the last time an SEC team had to play in 20-degree weather in Indiana? When was last, or just in 20-degree weather? When was the last time that happened? I mean, I'm not asking you to know. It's the last time that Riley Leonard's thrown for over 250 yards against a Power 5 opponent. That's not what we're talking about. No, if you can ask me a question, I get to ask you a question. Well, they're both hypothetical questions. No bullshit. All right. Wait until a team can stop you running the football and see what's going to happen. You go right on ahead. Y'all want to be cocky like you always are. I just don't know. Get your ass whipped. All right. I just don't know if we can say that so confidently. I can say three teams about it. Maybe Georgia. As confidently as I said that Indiana was going to get their ass whooped, is as confident as I'm saying. Notre Dame's better than Indiana. Notre Dame's better than Indiana. I didn't say that they weren't. But when a team makes you one-dimensional, it's going to make you throw the football. Riley Leonard cannot do it. Texas A&M tried. Didn't work. It's game one, Joe. Are y'all going to live off of that? Yes, because it's the only thing that we have. We don't have anything else. So let's wait till we play the playoff game. Let's wait till we play the playoff game. Okay. You know what equals out A&M? What? NIU. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Oh, that was week 2. Are you gonna hang up on? That's this is the whole circle that we keep going. Every time I talk to a Notre Dame fan, it's what about week 1 against A&M? Well, bitch, what about week 2? I don't mind bringing that up, but why are we just throwing out the win against Texas A&M? I mean, that Texas A&M win doesn't look as good as you're missing my point. Y'all want to throw in the A&M game, and you don't want to throw in the NIU game like it never existed. I don't mind bringing it up. I've never shied away from it. It's a bad loss. I guarantee you, as God is my witness, Riley Leonard has to throw the football like what Jalen Milroe had to do yesterday, and that's the game we're going to. You're in trouble, buddy. I'm going to promise you that. All right. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts.